Are you working on your website and do you want to know what buttons your website visitors click on? Then this is the video for you. Welcome to the channel, my name is Leon. This channel exists to help you make better decisions using your analytics data. If you want to support the mission, please click like and subscribe. Today I'm going to show you how to find out what buttons your website visitors are clicking on. You'll learn how to configure event tracking on the buttons on your site, and we're gonna build a beautiful report inside GA4 around button clicks. This is going to help you lots with improving your site. You'll know what call to action buttons are actually being used and what buttons need to be replaced or moved to a different location. Let's dive in. So the first step we're going to do is we need to investigate our website, and we need to find answers to two questions. The first question is what HTML tag is being used on our buttons. If you do not have any technical knowledge, please do not panic. This is probably a lot easier than you think. I'm going to show you exactly how you can find out the answer to this question. The second question that we need to answer is what class name or ID is being used on our buttons. So here's my site, and I already have a button right here on the home page. So to investigate the site and get the answer to my questions, we need to hover over our button and we need to right click and we need to look for the word inspect in the menu. So it's right here. And if you click that, a panel will open up with the HTML code from your page. And because we started with our mouse at the button, it will automatically select the button code for us. I'm gonna copy it into my Google Doc so we can go over exactly what we're looking for. So the first question, you kind of have two scenarios. The first scenario is we have a link, and we know that by looking at the first name in our code. So this is an A tag, and it's also closed with an A tag. A stands for anchor, which is a different word for link. So in case you have the letter A at the beginning of the tag and also in the closing tag, you'll have a link. So this means you have your tag is like this. So the other scenario is that you have no link. This has consequences for your trigger setup. It's going to be a little different. I have some edge cases at the end of the video where I cover this scenario. In my case, I'm working with a link, so that's the answer to my first question. The other question that we're looking for is what class name or ID is being used. And class names or IDs are used to name the elements on your site. So for instance, I have a class name. So in the class name, you can find it by looking for the word class and then is, and then this is the class name. What you will see here is I've used two class names in this button. I have the class name button and the class name primary, and it's separated by a space. So what I recommend if you have multiple classes is looking for the most general word. So here I have a class name button, and I also have a class name button and a dash dash primary. I recommend that you set up button click tracking on as many buttons on your site as possible, and that means that you will need to look for the most general class name available. So in some cases you'll find different class names being used. That doesn't really matter. What I come across a lot is the word BTN, and then for instance BTN large, BTN red. Again, if you would come across something like this, you have three class names, BTN, BTN large, BTN red, and again I would recommend just go for the most general class name available. And in some cases you do not have a class name, but you do have an ID available. For instance, ID is contact button. Well, in that case you can use just this ID. The only downside is that IDs are usually used for very specific buttons. So you'll only track this button and not all other buttons on the site. So that's why I prefer to work with class names instead of IDs. So the second step is to go into Google Tag Manager and to configure our event tracking. So let's go into tags and let's create a new tag. I'm gonna call it GA4 event button click. It doesn't really matter how you name your tags for how it works. It does matter for staying organized, but that's content for another video. What does matter are these two steps. Let's start just making the tag. I'm gonna assume you already have your GA4 tag set up. If not, there are a million different videos that show you how to do it on YouTube. But if you've set it up, we can go under Google Analytics GA4 event and then just look for the GA4 config tag that you have. You probably have it already in your GTM container. We're gonna give this a good event name. What I do is I call it button underscore click. So every time somebody clicks a button, there will be an event rolling into GA4 with the name button click. That's not the only thing that I want to track. I want to send a couple of different things. For instance, on this button I have in Dutch make an appointment, so just the text on the button, and also it points to the contact page. So if I click it, it points to, so the link on the button, I also want to track that. So to do that, I go under event parameters. I'm gonna add a parameter name. I'm gonna add link URL. I'm gonna add one with the name link text. So this is the URL of the button, this is the text of the button. And what I like to do, I also like to send the link classes and the link ID if available. To populate these automatically, we just use this little icon over here. So under link URL, I'm gonna look for click URL. It's already here on my side, but if you do not find it in the list, it should be under built-ins. So click URL, there you go. So under link text, we do the same. We're gonna look for the word click text. And again, if it's not in your list by default, you should go under built-ins and it should be here, click text. There you go. Link classes, I'm gonna use click classes here. So it's not in my list by default, so I'm gonna use click classes under built-ins. Link ID, same thing. It's not by default in my list yet, so I'm gonna go under built-ins and I'm gonna use click ID. So the fifth row that I'm gonna add here, I'm gonna call it button click count. I'm gonna use 1. This is gonna make my life a lot easier when building the report. I'll show you in a minute what this does. So this is all the information that we're gonna send into GA4. Now we need to set up when this information is being tracked. There's no button click trigger in my list yet, so I'm gonna need to make my own one. And this is where my research from the previous step comes in handy. I'm gonna make a new trigger. I'm gonna call it click button. Again, doesn't really matter what you call it. What does matter is how we configure it. Well, in my research, I found out that my HTML tag is actually a link. So this is important. This means that I'm gonna use my click trigger and then I'm gonna use this click trigger, just links. If this is not the case on your side, do not panic. I'll go over how to use the other click trigger at the end of the video. For now, I'm gonna use this as my primary example. So I'm gonna use just links. I do not want this to fire on all links. I just want to fire it on my button links. So in my research, I found out that on all buttons, the button clause is being used. So I'm just gonna copy that. I'm gonna say I want the trigger to fire on some link clicks. And then I'm gonna look for click classes. So it should be in the list. But if it's not there, you can go under built-in and then use click classes from here. If you've selected click classes, you should use contains, very important. And then we're gonna just paste the class name from our Google Doc. We're done here, so I'm just gonna hit save. I'm also gonna save the whole tag. And just to find out if this is actually working or not, we can hit preview and just test if this is working. So I'm gonna go into my own site, I'm gonna connect it, and then it opens up a debug session. You can see that it's linked by the fav icon. I have my button right here, so I'm gonna click it and go into Tag Assistant, and I see that under tags fired, my GA4 event button click has actually fired like it should. And if I click on there and I click through, I also see the link URL, the link text, the link classes and the link ID and the button click count. Everything that I've set up is actually being sent to GA4. So the last thing I want to do is I want to go into GA4 and see how these events are actually coming into GA4 itself. So to do that, I'm going into admin, my own site, and then I'm going to go into debug view. And if I open up debug view, because I've been testing inside of the Tag Assistant, all the events that I'm tracking should be rolling in automatically. And I do see here that the button click event is rolling in. And if I open this up, I see that all the parameters that I selected, link classes, link text, link URL, these are working like it should. So to finish this step, I'm just gonna hit submit, track button clicks, publish. This will push these changes live. From now on, every button click on my site is being tracked. So the last step we need to take is we actually need to make a beautiful report around this. Remember that on our button click tags, we actually made this parameter button click count 1. So I'm just gonna go under admin and then custom definitions, custom metrics. I'm gonna create a custom metric I'm going to call it button clicks. I'm going to give it a description. And then as event parameter, I'm going to copy button click count in my event parameter. As a unit of measurement, you're just going to use standard. And then I'm going to hit save. So now I can go into reports and I'm going to go into library and I'm going to create a new report. I'm going to create a new detail report. As dimensions, I'm going to look for link, text, and then link, URL, link, classes, link, ID. Those are the 4 fields that I send with every button click. And I'm going to hit apply. So as metrics, you can use the custom button clicks metric that we just registered. If for some reason you do not want to make this custom metric, an alternative could be that you use event count. But I'm not going to use that because I have my own custom metric for this. This also means that I do not have to filter it down. Every time I open the report, I need to filter it down to button clicks. It just opens up with button clicks right away. It's just a little easier. But what I do like to add here is the amount of users. I'm going to hit apply. I do not see historical data in here yet because I've just set it up. If I log in tomorrow, if I log in next week, I should be able to see button clicks here. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to give it a report name called button clicks. I'm going to hit save. So to actually make this report visible in the sidebar, I need to add this to one of the collections. So if you have no collection yet, you can create one here. I have already a collection available that I use for custom reports. It's just called Leon Korteweg, which is my name. I'm gonna just hit publish real quick. So I already have some sample reports here. I'm gonna edit this collection and I'm gonna look for button clicks. Yeah, there you go. I'm just gonna go edit to an existing collection and I'm going to save the changes to the current collection. And now my button clicks report is visible in the sidebar of my GA4 property. Again, no historical data yet because we've just set it up. But if I log in tomorrow, if I log in next week, I should be able to see link clicks here. So one thing you probably want to do with this report is you want to filter this down to one page, because this report will contain all buttons on your site. For instance, the home page, but also every other page on your site. So this also has button clicks. This also has button clicks. So, and let's say you just want all button clicks just from your homepage. What you could do with this report is go under add filter. And what you need to do here is under select dimension, you look for path. And you'll find page path and screen class. We're going to use this. And then dimension values. You should find something that looks like this, a slash. This means homepage. Or if you want to analyze a different page, just look for it here and click apply. This will filter down the entire report to show just the button clicks on a single page. Another common thing that you could do with this report is make a different filter. So I'm going to click add filter. Again, I want to see the home page. So I'm going to select page path and screen class. Again, slash, which is home. I'm going to hit OK. But I do not want to see it for every homepage user. I just want to see it for the mobile users on the homepage. I'm going to add a new condition. I'm going to say device category and I'm going to select mobile here. Okay. So I'm going to hit apply. This will show only the button clicks on the homepage, but then only from the mobile visitors. So that's it. That's how you find out what buttons people are clicking on your site. Before I close the video, I want to go over 2 edge cases. So in my experience, the method I just showed you works for about 60 to 70% of the sites. But there are some other common types of buttons that can easily be tracked using Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics 4. And I want to give you 2 edge cases before we close the video. So we're talking about the research I did in step 1, where I copied the code from my button into this Google Doc, and we discovered that the HTML tag that was used on my button was an anchor, an A tag, which is a link, and the class name was button. But what if this is not the case on your site? Well, there are 2 common examples that you will find on many sites. And the first example are form buttons. So for instance, the button down below this contact form, if I inspect it using the same method, so I go over with my mouse, right click and hit inspect, we will see that the code from this button differs from the rest of the site. So let me just copy it. So I copied it in my Google Doc to compare this with my regular buttons. So before we go on, I need to tell you that there's probably a better way to track forms than using button clicks. One problem, for instance, is if the form doesn't validate because there's no valid email address and people click send. Right now we have tracked a button click, but there's no conversion being done because the form didn't validate. So if you use this method to track, for instance, contact form submissions, you'll probably measure more contact form submissions than there have been in reality. But in some cases you just want to track clicks on these kinds of buttons anyway, and this is how you do it. So what we see here, the tag type is not an anchor, but it's an input. So that's why if you want to set up a trigger, you would use click on all elements. And then if we're going to look for a class name, I see that we have 3 class names on this element. So again, these are separated by space. What we see here is that the last class name has the word submit in it, and that's the one I'm going to use. So let's go over how you set up these kinds of button clicks. Well, the first part stays the same. Because we do not have a link, there will be no click URL and no click text, but I expect that we will get some click classes and click IDs anyway, so we're just going to leave this. The thing that's different is the trigger. So I'm going to leave the original trigger here. I'm going to add a new trigger with the name click form button, and I'm going to choose click on all elements because we're not dealing with a link here, we're dealing with an input which is not a link. We need click on all elements, and then the trigger fires on some clicks, and this is where it gets interesting. Because we're using this trigger, in my experience, it's a little bit more tricky. So what I like to do is, I'm not gonna use click classes, but under built-in variables, I'm gonna select click element. And then I'm gonna say matches CSS selector. So it's a little bit different, but what we're gonna do, I'm gonna copy the tag name, which is input in my case. Then I'm gonna hit a dot, and then I'm going to use the class name that this button has. So again, I'm going to say click element matches CSS selector, and then the tag name, which is input in my case, a dot, and then the class name. And then I'm going to hit save. Let's go look if this actually works. So I'm going to hit preview. This starts a preview session. I'm going to hit contact, and I'm just going to click the submit button. And GA4 event button click fire 2 times. Yeah, 2 times because this is also a button, and then this one. So let's click it again just to be sure. Send 3 times. Yeah, this is working as is expected. In the debug view under admin, debug view, let's go and have a look. I see a button click coming in. There you go. Link classes. Yeah, it's the submit button. And as expected, there's no link text and link URL because we do not have a link here. So that's edge case number 1. Edge case number 2 is when you encounter a link that doesn't have class names, but it has an ID. So let's say, for example, that we have this code instead of our regular button code. So we do not have a class, but we do have an ID. Again, an ID is not really optimal because an ID usually happens only once per page or once per site, so it's really specific for just one button. I personally prefer to track as many buttons as possible, but if you want to track this button, we would need to set up our trigger a little bit different. So let's go into Google Tag Manager. Let's go into our button click. Again, the tag stays the same. Our trigger is just a little bit different. So let's go into our button click trigger. So instead of click classes contains button, if you do not have a class name, but you do have an ID, what you would need to do is you would need to choose click ID. And if it's not in the list, it should be under built-in. Click ID contains, and then you just copy the value like this, and then you hit save. So this is the end of the video. I hope this video was clear and helpful for you. If you have any questions, please leave them down below in the comments. Also, if you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That really helps me get this channel off the ground. I hope you'll have a great day and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.